Welcome back to the channel. Thank you guys for hanging with me on this Friday. And if you went out of your way to like, comment, or subscribe, thank you. So yesterday I did a video basically explaining that there is a portion of every lake, depending on wherever you're at in the country, whatever type of bait fish you have, structure, cover, there's something that is going to be better than everything else on any body of water. Doesn't matter if it's a pond or a big natural lake or a man-made reservoir. They all have a specific pattern or deal or whatever you want to call it that just tends to be better than everything else. Now, I didn't really do a great job of explaining that. I kind of jumped all around in the video, so today I want to do a little bit better of a job explaining it, and I think the best way to do that is to kind of talk about what bass are going to do in all 4 seasons, and then kind of go into little different segments on what I've seen on different lakes. So in the wintertime, fishing is pretty simple. Bass are going to be very close to the main river channel and the creek channels. Now, they may be in 2 feet of water, but they are going to be a very short swim away from some of the deepest water on the lake, into the abyss, the channel. Now, once we get into the spring, or the pre-spawn, the first little factor in the spring, you're going to see fish that are going to move shallow. They have to get shallow to spawn, but they also are going to find food shallow. They're going to find cover shallow. So there's a lot of reasons that they're going to be there. They're not necessarily spawning in the early springtime. They're in the pre-spawn mode and they're feeding. So shallow is where the bass need to be. Now, if you don't have a bunch of shallow structure or cover on your lake, they may be out relatively shallow. You know, they may be out in that 6 to 10 foot range, depending on where they go most of the year. But on lakes that have a abundance of cover and shallow structure, like flats and drains that are in shallow water, you will see a lot of bass in the shallows in the early spring. Now, the pre-spawn, spawn, and post-spawn, that can typically last February to maybe even the beginning of May. Then a bass is going to head towards the main river channel. So if you have a natural lake, I think they're just going to get out a little bit further, a little deeper. And if you have a man-made reservoir, like most lakes in this country, they're heading towards the main river channel. So all those bass that are at the mouth of a creek channel, they are going to be out towards the main river channel. So all of those bass that are populating your creeks, they are now sucked out to the main river channel. All those bass that are on the main lake, but maybe they're on points and drains and stuff that are near, are just not even near the main river channel, they're going to be sucked out to the main river channel. So everything in the summertime, post-spawn, beginning summer period, is going to the main river channel. Now, as you get into later in the summer, fish are going to kind of disperse. As we move into the fall, typically the best fishing is going to be up the river, into the creeks, or on the flatter part of the main lake. Now, I'm going to stop there and start addressing where I've seen bass in these times of year. So as we get into the summertime, that is like a refresher. It's going to push everything back into the main river channel. The same thing happens in the winter. It's a refresher. It's going to push all those bass into the creek channel and the main river channel. Then as they move to new places, they're going to start a feeding period. So you're going to see bass come out of the depths in the winter time into the pre-spawn, and they feed heavily. Same thing goes when they're in the post-spawn. They start getting out to their summer places, they're going to feed heavily. Now, this is where I've been talking about there's places where bass want to live. So if you have a lake that has a ton of offshore structure, I think of like a Kentucky lake, a Pickwick, where there's all kinds of great stuff to fish out in like 8 to 20 feet of water. Those bass can stay out there May, June, July, August. They can be out there even up until September. I've seen them stay out deep. The reason for that is because you have so much of that fishing spots where those fish want to get. And on a lake like Kentucky Lake or Pickwick, it's offshore structure. Now, what will tend to happen if you don't have a ton of those spots, like a Gunnersville, where there's not a whole lot of great offshore structure spots in comparison to a Kentucky Lake or a Pickwick, those fish get pressured and they have to go somewhere else. So they want to be on those ledgy spots. Those are the best spots for the bass to live. There's a ton of bait and food, and they don't have to move around because the current is just pushing it to them. So that's where they want to live. In my video that I did yesterday, there is a dominant place where they want to live. If the lake is on fire, you can go out there and catch the biggest bags you'll catch all year on those spots. There's so much pressure and there's a lack of those spots, those bass are going to go somewhere else. They're going to get pushed all around. Now, on lakes that have abundance of those spots, they're going to be out there for a while. So it's very important to note that if your lake has a very obvious place where bass want to go, and this could be any time of year, it could be the spring, could be the summer, could be the fall. If you have a bunch of fishing pressure and you don't have a ton of those places for them to hide, they're going to just disperse. So that's why I think it's very important to understand whatever deal you're looking for. And every lake's going to have a couple different places, and depending on what time of year, you know, if it's the spring, they're going to get around a certain grass when they're spawning, and that can be pretty obvious once you figure it out. But if you have 100 people in boats in shallow water around that grass fishing for them, the fishing's going to get tough, and they're going to have to go and do other things, and you're going to have to go look for them in other places. So it's very important to note that yes, there's a dominant factor, but you also have to realize how many people are on the water and they're fishing, and they're going to start moving fish around. So when we talk about a lake like Lake Guntersville, historically one of the most popular lakes for the last 30 years or longer, you can't always just go by the textbook of this is where they should be, this is where they'll be in a month, this is where they'll be in the spring, and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't really work with that, because where they are or where they wanted to be, they got fish for it too much, so they moved them. So that's when it's going to open up other types of patterns where you can just go and try this and that, and they're not out in 25 feet. Maybe they've moved into 2 feet because no one's fishing for them in 2 feet. Things like that are going to happen. So very important to understand there's a place where bass want to live, and they probably lived that way for a long time before our electronics got really good. But now that we know every contour on the bottom of the lake, we can see them down there, they go other places. So that's why it's important to have your main deal and go look for that, and then also have a lot of backup strategies, because fish are going to be pushed around. And it's not just big reservoirs and big natural lakes. This same thing can happen on that farm pond that I've been talking about. If you have something where the bass are typically at, where you can usually always catch a bass, the more times you fish that, it's going to push fish other places. So there is that place where the bass want to live on your farm pond, but if you always hit it, it's going to move them other places on the pond. And that's just the exact same thing that happens on big lakes. So it's very important to understand fishing pressure and understand that there are places where fish are going to always live. And you can catch them there if you find those magic spots. I have like 2 of them on Guntersville where I can catch them spring, summer, fall. Now I only have 2 of those, and I've been fishing out here for 10 years. So a lot of my places, they're typically good for just a couple weeks. The people find them there, they catch them, you got to find new fish constantly. Now, every once in a while, you'll find that honey hole that you can go back to every time and catch bass there, no matter what time of year. But even those places will dry up eventually. You got to continue to go find new spots. So good luck to you guys. Try that, and I'll see you on the water.